Hi, and welcome to the Pilgrim Path podcast. My name is Chris Surber. I'm the senior minister at First Congregational Church of Naples, Florida, and I'm also the executive director of Supply and Multiply, a ministry that was founded by my wife and I, our family, and a bunch of friends, beginning in Haiti and now expanding into other parts of the world. And listen, today I have a guest with me that I'm really looking forward to talking to. This is Daniel Livingston, who I met while serving as pastor of Mount Hope Congregational Church in the Detroit area in Livonia, Michigan. And for the longest time, when he started coming to the church, I couldn't remember his name. I'm always bad with names, and I kept referring to him as the three-piece suit guy when I was talking to people, because he would always come in these very nice suits with a vest and the whole thing. And then he popped back up in my life. Among the long list of things that I that I do, I've never been very good at saying no. I serve in the National Association of Congregational Christian Churches in a couple of ways, including serving as a mentor, as a teacher for our lay ministry training program in the area of missions. And so then he popped back up, and I saw his name on the roster of students, and I thought that can't be the three-piece suit guy. And turns out it was. And and then so anyway, Dan, hey, it's great to see you. Good to talk to you. And just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get talking specifically on the subject of your recent article in the Congregationalist magazine entitled "Supporting Our Pastors." And I was really interested in this, and then I saw that you had written another article on a closely related topic. And yeah, so introduce yourself, and then let's talk about it.
Absolutely, Chris. It's so great to see you again. And I can tell you that you being down there in Naples, Florida, I can see you're in a short sleeve shirt. It is snowing
Yeah,
outside.
with
Uh,
my palm tree coffee cup.
oh, absolutely. I have a hoodie on. I got a
Yeah,
few
yeah,
layers. So I can say to all my southern friends there, enjoy the sun while you have it.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
um,
I missed that snow a little bit up in Michigan, but only so much. Only so
oh
much.
yeah, absolutely. It is fun. Not so much to drive in, but outside that, it is most certainly serene to look at God's beauty when it is snowing out there.
That's right.
But yeah, my name is Daniel Weeda Livingston, and from Mount Hope Congregational Church in Livonia, Michigan. And Chris, it's so great to be here. And when I was looking at my syllabus and I saw your name, I was like, well, it looks like we're
Yeah,
going to cross paths again.
yeah, that's
And
amazing.
so it's just, yeah, just how you're on your pilgrimage and I'm on mine, and how they still they intertwine and they still juncture,
Oh, I
down the road.
absolutely. I was reminded when I was thinking about you this morning that of something a friend of mine from Southern Virginia says. She says, "Hey, be careful dropping people; they bounce." And I always remember that. And of course, she means don't just discard with people because they tend to show back up in your life. And so I've always taken that to heart. I always see relationships as like the greatest wealth in my life, and so I don't drop people. And then I'm just stunned sometimes when the way the web of relational network, what God does, it's really something. So yeah, so I'm very interested. Tell me, how did you become interested on this topic, especially? I know a little bit from talking to you in the past, but what do you, what drives your interest in something like this? And also, what do you think about it? I mean, why is it an important topic, and what drives your interest about it?
Absolutely. And it's a huge, wide variety of array of how to even tackle the subject of supporting our pastors here in the United States. The Christian climate, the religious climate in our country has most certainly shifted and changed, and it almost seems like it's daily. My Christian walk is a little different than probably most people's. From what I found, it's when I was growing up, theology and anything of talking about God wasn't really a topic in our house. We weren't churchgoers or anything.
Right.
We weren't religious whatsoever. Now, my grandparents, they did go to church. My dad's side, they were Presbyterians. On my mom's side, my grandparents, one was a non-practicing Mormon, and the other one was excommunicated Catholic.
That's quite a varied pedigree.
Absolutely.
Religiously.
Absolutely. And what actually got me into the congregational faith was actually the union of them before I was even born. It was actually a congregational minister that decided to marry them back during a climate that, was a little bit more moralistic.
Right.
And, finding a pastor or preacher to marry them was a little difficult. But a congregational minister, nevertheless, did marry them. And that actually is what got me in through the doors. And when I came in, it was Father's Day 2001, just 3 months before September 11th. And I remember the church climate then. It was starting on the decline from the 90s.
Right.
And then September 11th happened, and there was a huge influx where people were coming in through the church doors. And ever since, we've kind of seen a little bit of uh, decline when there has been many opportunities for people to come in through the church doors. So I've been really kind of studying that for the last couple of years of like why that might be and
Yeah.
the climate out there. So it really inspired me to write this article of supporting our pastors because our pastors and ministers and lay leaders they are probably in the most crucial need right now on the mission field out there. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know that around the time that I came here, that was, you had come into Mount Hope, and from what I understand, I mean, you've taken a strong interest in being a part of that church's future. And what are some ways? I mean, what are some specific ways you think? I would whether it's at Mount Hope or anywhere else, that people can apply these kind of thoughts. I mean, when I my walk started. Similarly, I didn't grow up in church at all. And when I went into the ministry, I had such a high view of the pastoral office that I think I was frankly a little bit naive to some of the real challenges of ministry. And now pastoring churches for, 20 years, being actively involved in preaching and outreach ministry and mission work for longer than that. I mean, the practical side of ministry can be very challenging. I mean, what do you think are some ways that maybe that you see that you're doing or that others are doing or that people can do to support their pastors in the mission of reaching people with the gospel, of ministering to the saints in the church? I mean, I sometimes think that there are some people who falsely equate ministerial calling to some kind of imperviousness to the to the personal struggles of life. I mean, I try very much to emulate a way of ministry that it becomes relatable and approachable because I want it to seem like I'm just a guy who Jesus ambushed telling other people about this Jesus because that's what I am. And and so yeah, I sometimes I say it takes a Marine Corps. I needed to be a Marine Staff Sergeant to successfully navigate some of the harder aspects of ministry, all the way from the petty to the profoundly difficult. And
Absolutely.
I mean, what do you think? What are ways that people could or should be supporting the like you said, the people in lay leadership, the people, kind of an outdated term, but the folks that are actively in ministry in the church, and the pastors, the associate pastors, the whatever. I mean, what are some things that people should be looking at? Maybe to counter the consumer culture that seems to be all rampant in even in the churches.
Absolutely. And I think you actually touched on a few points, actually. And one of them is that, we, each person in the church has a responsibility, whether it be to individually learn the gospel or just to do a little lay reading or topical reading, of the Bible. But they also have a responsibility to whether go out into the community, the grocery store, restaurant, and to disciple and to be able to be out there in mission or to be on the mission field and to get out there. So that takes a couple of points. Um, you know, uh, I think about I'm going through a history book right now of congregationalism of the 17th century
Nice.
and just how people used to hide their Bibles, or especially in England, it was like illegal. It was illegal to actually have a Bible, so
Right.
separatists would hide their Bibles. So, when when I think about supporting our pastors, like, and I have that Bible in my hand, it's like I think about just like what a freedom of it is just to have that book in my hand, and how many people have died and been scrutinized or have lost their families, lands, or even their lives or loved ones.
Right.
Just to have that book in their hands. So I really read that, book with pride, and knowing that, there were people there doing the same exact thing, who lost their lives by doing that. So with that in mind, it's very important just to go out and to feel the attitude of the community, because that's one thing about congregationalism is that we're very community oriented,
Yeah.
and I don't think we should ever lose that spirit of just feeling the pulse of our community and just
Yeah.
knowing what the needs and resources are. And there's quite a need out there in the world right now. So, but knowing where the resources are and where you can direct people, and knowing that pastors cannot lift the whole entire world on their shoulders. They can't do it themselves. And that's why it's very important, I think, for the being congregation to step up and to take that burden off our pastors and our ministers.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there is inherent to the congregational way. I really you see it in other church traditions, especially those that are of congregational with a little c, who run according to that way of being. But if there is anything that is distinctly beautiful about the historic congregational way, it occurs to me that it is at least something like we not only have the right to study the Word of God for ourselves, but really the congregational way is kind of built on the idea that we have the responsibility to do so, as a collection of a gathering of fellow followers of Jesus, of seekers of God, and I that for sure there is this divide, I think, among a lot of the the people in the church. You've got those who are looking for the Starbucks style approach to receiving ministry. I want to drive through. I want to get what the minister has for me, what the deacons, they better welcome me kindly at the front door, the greeters, whatever. And it's like a consumer mentality. And really, if the inherent to the congregational way, and if there's any validity to the congregational way, it's because it's as we observe it to be consistent with the way of the early church, as we find in the book of Acts, as we find in the writings of the early church fathers, that it is and was a pattern of cultivating community. So there is no such thing. The Bible is at war with this idea of consumer Christianity, coming through to get a little advice, a little pick me up, a little bit of encouragement. Oh, that minister better say the right things to to leave me, to benefit me. And when in all reality, what you're saying is exactly right. It's like uh, believers have not only the right to say, well, I'm going to read the Bible on my own, but the responsibility so that we can collectively serve one another. And then, like you just said, paying attention. I mean, the pastor, in my view, the called leader of the church or whatever, the servant leader, is essentially one to equip the saints, right? And now I'm going to start paraphrasing scripture, to equip the saints for every good work. So there's this idea that it's like we call a pastor because he's competent, he's a good speaker, whatever it is, he has a certain set of skills, and then we'll all just support him in doing the mission of the church. When in fact, the way to support is to say, now, how do we do this as a team?
Absolutely. And there's quite a few things that even I'm experimenting with right now. We have a few new members that one of them is actually a friend of mine that I've known for years. He was exploring the thought of coming to Jesus, and he just recently was baptized a few months ago.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
I was very
Yeah,
happy to be
that's
there to witness
fantastic.
that.
Yeah,
Uh, and congregationalism right now really I think, has a strong opportunity the way how the climate is right now, and is
yeah,
that, we are a Congregationalists are all about covenants, not creeds.
right.
And it's really amazing. I think if more people just understood that they have a direct phone line to Jesus, to God through Jesus. I think that really perks a lot of people's ears, because I think people just want to explore God without having a bishop or a king standing over them or a
Right,
pope.
right.
So, and there's another thing too, and I'm about to take this approach too, and I think to take the burden off the pastors is people are coming to church to have their lives transformed.
Right.
They want to change their lives. That's what I'm least seeing in 2024 today.
I think
When
so.
people were coming to church in the 80s and 90s, I think it was more kind of a generational thing. My grandparents did it, so I want to do
Right.
it too, and I want to raise a family. Today, it's a 180-degree different climate.
Yeah.
People of my generation really not getting married, not really having families. So what do we do? I One thing that I am experimenting with, and I haven't debuted this anywhere, is I know when I first came into Christianity, as a young adult, people were like, read the book of John. That's the first book to
Right.
read, which, hey, I think that's a really awesome start. And I think
Yeah.
it's really great to do that maybe in a group setting where you can sit down and explain it to the newcomer just exactly what
Right.
they're reading. So it doesn't feel like they're reading like hieroglyphs.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, but I think people today, they're coming into church to have their lives transformed and they
Hmm.
want to walk like a Christian. They want to know what the Christian moral. So I'm starting to refer people to the book of James.
Oh,
It's
sure. Yeah.
5 chapters, super short, and almost every verse is how do you live? Like
Yeah.
if you live this way, like the rest will follow, the rest will come, as it says in I'm paraphrasing now too,
Yeah. Yeah.
Matthew 6:33, put the kingdom
Right.
first.
Oh,
So
yeah.
So I'm really starting to steer people that way so they're not so overwhelmed when they come in through the church doors and they're being bombarded with all this information. It's like, all right, let's keep it simple, just like the separatists did back in
Yeah.
1620. Let's just boil it down to the word and
Oh,
let's just go
absolutely.
from there.
I have,
So
in our ministry life, it's almost like I've lived two ministry lives. The one before I lived in Haiti, and God used Haiti in a God ruined my life in Haiti in the most beautiful possible ways. When I went to Haiti, I had a certain view of ministry, and it was legitimate, and it was rooted in the scripture, and but I had a certain kind of view where I thought, oh, okay, I still had my mind in terms of shape of what success looks like or how you shape success. Was like, oh, I should pastor this church and then eventually a larger church and then a larger church. That's what ministry success looks like. And when I went to Haiti, I kind of questioned that way of thinking, but it still kind of lived in me. And when I went there, and I God crushed all of those thoughts and boiled it down to the most simple kind of Christianity, which isn't measured by numbers and I wasn't like crazy given over to that, but it still lived in me. I still had a very American way of thinking about everything. And living in a country where the only resource you really have is the people around you, it really drove me to a deeper place of understanding that God is calling us to cultivate community. And so those experiences on the mission field, coupled with a what I didn't realize was a distinctly congregational way of thinking that I was growing into from studying. When I came into congregational church, I didn't know what they were. And and I love history, so I spent so much time trying to understand what they were, that it was almost like I rescued a bunch of ideas that rescued my thoughts about Christian community. And I think you're spot on, because right now there are so many people who are interested in a place where they can get out of the left-right divide, the political, machinery that seems always to be tugging on our thoughts, and they just want to get to the root and have a relationship with God. And then we're having so that's, I think, present in the culture, coupled with the fact that the younger generations coming up are some of the most altruistic people ever. So sometimes we'll criticize that, older folks will criticize that generation. But if you look closely, what they seem to be saying is, we've tasted the rotten fruit of the consumerism of this culture. We're not impressed with the toys, the wealth, all of that. We want to live lives of meaning. And then into this situation, you've got a lot of options for let's say self-development, and a lot of these this culture, though, seems to get that they need something beyond just development of better habits, development of better, patterns of activity, and they want to get to something deeper. And here is the congregational way, which inherent to our way is casting a wide net, gathering people in around with an open mind, an open Bible, and a heart filled with the Holy Spirit. And it occurs to me that in order to be mobilized to reach this community or this culture, that we need churches that are packed with people who will at least invite a friend to the church, who will at least share their faith. And really, we could use mobilized believers to even do a little bit more than that, and participate in that life on life, real relational development. And it just seems like for us, these churches, we almost are an underutilized resource, let's say, if we're going to think about it sociologically. And then for the kingdom of God, man, I think that God, we may be seeing, I like to think, maybe we're on the verge of a quiet revival in a lot of our churches, because the hearts of our pastors and the people, in the pews are for something like that. I mean, that's what I'm praying for our churches. Is something right along those lines, what you're saying.
Absolutely. And, you touch on wonderful points. One to note is that, congregationalism is a very wonderful resource. And I think right now in 2024 that we have a great opportunity, and we ought to jump on it, of just what the climate is in our country. I think there is a thirst. We've seen the trend
Yeah.
of atheism, agnosticism on the rise, but I think there is an absolute thirst from what I've been talking for my generation. People do want to explore God, and they
Yeah.
do want to, have a sense of community. And I think right now, the one thing that we're seeing the struggle in the world is having that sense of belonging and that sense of
Yeah.
community. And
Yes.
uh, 1776, when founding of our country, 1 out of 3 people were Congregationalists. It was the
Right.
biggest
Right.
denomination
Yep.
uh, in our country. And if you look at our Constitution, a lot of our polity and governance of this country was founded
Yep.
on the
Heavily
congregational
heavily
principles.
influenced by the congregational way and those way of thinking, this whole country. And we have right
100%.
now, there's like a meaning crisis, I think, is the real thing that's happening, and people are looking for meaning. And in our churches, by and large, the attitude is, one of where we can come together and seek the Lord. There's a certain kind of freedom that I've always felt in congregational churches. Now, of course, that freedom can also allow for people to go completely off the rails in one way or the other. And
Sure.
I mean, so there's that risk. But one of the, gosh, who said it? It was somewhere in some dusty book that I read, that it's was it Robert Brown's book on congregationalism? I think he called it a wise weakness. I'm almost certain it was Robert Brown. It may not be. That we do in our, let's say, quest for cultivating communities of faith that are expansive and broad enough for people to come with their actual questions in a kind of lack of judgment way, like, hey, I never understood this, and the fundamentalist preacher I grew up around, he made me feel guilty for asking the question, and I'm sympathetic to all of those, because I'm in network with people from every possible corner of Christendom, so I'm not unsympathetic, let's say, to the fundamentalist interest to keep doctrinal standards. Okay, I get it. However, if I come to the pastor and my life's a mess, if I come to my Christian friend and my life's a mess, you know, if there's a brick wall of moral, let's say, rigidity, how do I even enter in to where I can find the God who chases me down in Christ to ambush me with his love, who loves me into transformation. And
Absolutely.
and if we keep the Bible open, and
Hmm.
if we keep a certain breadth or broadness of discussion alive, like you just, I think that there is so much a place for congregational churches today of this variety, of the
Absolutely.
time where we're just cultivating community. we're worshiping God. We're looking for life transformation. I mean, I have this church is growing steadily, and it's all predicated on friendships. And some of these
100%.
friends of mine, they're not what you'd hold up as a perfect moral standard, but neither am I.
Sure.
And so it's
Neither am
like,
I.
yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. That's um yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think you really did touch on something really great there is that, I think my generation, I think a lot of people got turned off from churches and right around the turn of the millennium and even 10 years ago, having this perceived notion that, oh, you must be moralistic or legalistic, which sure, there are a lot of denominations out there that are like that. But luckily
Yep,
with Congregationalism, it's like, no, that's between you and God. Like,
right.
no one else interferes with that. That's strictly between you and Jesus, and
My
that is it.
favorite thing I ever heard on Christian radio in Detroit, and I don't remember the guy's name. I used to listen to him once in a while on the radio, and he's a preacher from somewhere in the city, and I can't remember the guy's name. And anyway, he said one day I was listening. He says, "You ain't got to be somebody else's Holy Ghost," and I thought, "Oh yeah, exactly. That's exactly right." It's like
I wonder if that was Paul Shepard.
yeah, it might have been that actually it's possible that that's who it was. And I don't remember the I used to listen once in a while at the around the same time of day, and I'd catch this preacher. Um,
Sure.
yeah, but we're called to cast a net, and it
Yeah.
takes more than one person to keep the net mended. You said this in this particular article. I love this. What can you do to support? Question number one, ask your pastor how you can help. It's like, yes, yes, please. And the help
Absolutely.
and the help might not be exactly what you think. It might be, hey, I really need somebody. I've been building this relationship in the prison, like we did a little bit of at Mount Hope,
Sure.
in the juvenile detention center in near downtown. And
Yeah.
I need somebody to go with. And a few brave souls did. And now, had I been able to stay there long enough to cultivate that relationship longer, my hope was that eventually I'd have a couple of people who are like, oh, they'll take it on and they'll go in and they'll be the ones taking people. All the way
Sure.
to, hey, I got a mess in the back room and I really need some people to come in and help clean that thing up. And
Absolutely.
having a willingness to hear the answer and then help. I mean, what do you think about that? I think a lot of people just, maybe they're hesitant to even ask.
I think I was guilty of this when I first came to church that, I think a lot of people are naive that ministers, they write sermons, they just preach every Sunday, and then they pick up the phone and check on people every
Right,
now and
right,
then. That's all
right.
that there is to ministry. Oh, no, it's not. I've been diving deep into ministry school and getting a peek behind the curtain to see what really goes on with pastoralship. And
Yeah,
there's so much work. And the one thing I really learned, and yes, absolutely, people, it first starts going up to the pastor and what can I do to help? And everyone has so many different, wide variety of spiritual gifts. Um, in fact, a quick example is I won't name the pastor, but I walked up to him and I'm like, hey, what can I do to help? And I was working in the emergency room at the time. Goes, you know what? Going to the hospitals is, especially the emergency room, it's not really my forte. There's a lot of germs, diseases.
yeah.
I'm not really educated on the protocols on what to do.
Nope.
And luckily, that's one of my gifts.
Yeah, yeah,
I
right.
mean, I worked in the COVID unit for a while, so um, it's something I did pick up a time or two, got to take that burden off. We all have spiritual gifts, and it does not matter what age you are. You can be 90,
Yeah.
100 years old, and you can still just come up to somebody and just like, hey, just want to say God is working in my life. And, just that little interaction or spark can really send a ripple effect to that person's family or to their loved ones or to ever who may they're speaking. Or they could just be really just needing someone to come up to them and just say, hey, hi, hello. And because they're depressed and they don't want to reach out or they're in their shell and they're just moping but just walking up and having that human interaction can just completely change someone's day
Oh,
and world.
absolutely. And it can be so important and it can be super simple. Like the second thing you said, focus on engaging youth and young adults. right now I have somebody who comes to this church, and a young kid, and I am so excited every time I see this kid, and I just always make sure that they know that, like, hey, you belong here. I'm excited that you're here. And but no matter how good the minister is or is not at making people feel welcome, he's just one guy. And it doesn't take a very filled space before it's not possible for the minister, and to connect with all those people. And the thing that I'd love to hear most is, and I hear it here all the time, man, your congregation is so welcoming. So many people has told me, "Hey, I'm glad you're here. Can I do something for you? Can I show you where to sit? Whatever it is." And to be perfectly honest, like, I haven't done a lot of training in that area to this. That's just who they are, and it can be so tremendously important. And we can't underestimate. I used to say this, in fact, quite often at Mount Hope. We had a couple of circumstances there where some people had come in, and I'm seeing it more and more. Here, it's happened a lot where people are coming in and they confide in me. One night we had a certain service at Mount Hope. This is where it really kind of clicked in my mind as an area of focus. And a person had come in. It was like, I don't remember. It was a Christmas Eve service or something, like a special service. And this person expressed to me afterwards, I was giving serious thought to ending it all. I came in this building, you welcomed me, and then, even though it was like
Wow.
a sparsely attended service, there wasn't a ton of people. I think it was snowing. I think it was like 5 degrees outside,
Sure.
whatever it was. And but everybody who was there had kind of put their arm around this person. I stayed in touch with this person for I don't know, a few months, and we probably provided, just with a sort of extravagant welcome, maybe you could call it something like that, um, at least a little fork in the road for this person. And so, there's so much that can be said for something you think isn't that big of a deal. Like, I used to say up there quite a bit. I remember um, just attending one of these special services can be so meaningful, because maybe you didn't need the sermon or the worship or a testimony or whatever was happening that night. Maybe you didn't really need it that night, but your presence in the place added to the robustness of the relational community for that person that God sent in there that night. And so your presence was an act of worship and service. And
Absolutely.
and then, especially if you like this, focus on engaging youth and young adults, and people say, oh, we need a big giant youth program. You could use it maybe, but in my experience, you know tell that kid that you're glad they're there,
Absolutely.
and then
Yeah,
act like you are, you know be actually
absolutely.
glad. Yeah.
And great point. And I'm gonna tell on myself too. Uh, you know, I'm in my early 40s. I'm not married. I don't have any children. I don't know a thing about fathering a child. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
from I know Adam. Um, so I didn't know anything about kids, and by Providence, about a year ago, I was asking quite a bit of my pastor, what can I do to help? What can I do to
Yeah.
help? And they're like, well, we need help in the Sunday school room, and we're going to need you to be there for a little while, maybe
Right.
for a few months.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I mean, I was thrown to the wolves,
Yeah.
and I had to learn, I mean, from scratch, but today it is so important that we engage with our youth. And today it's like I
Yeah.
love the children that I teach. I love the children that I interact with at church and even outside church. And it's so funny because a couple years ago I was afraid of children, but today it's so important that we do go up to our children and just tell them just how important they really are, so that they remember when they get into their adult years just how warm and loving church really was to them. Because
Yeah.
people might not remember exactly what you say to them, but they
Yep.
will remember how you made them feel.
100%.
And it's important that we absolutely do that. And you mentioned something about that person that came into Mount Hope
Yeah.
during that 5-degree night. Um, yes, we do have an ordained minister, but everyone in the church, young and old, is called to ministry.
Yeah.
Um, and I have this saying, it's like I don't remember every headache that I ever had, but I do remember that time when someone brought me an aspirin and water for that one
That's
headache.
right.
I remember that one. And if we just do that and just remember that, and just never forget that time when we were sick or maybe depressed. I remember when I
Yeah.
was laying in the hospital bed and a priest came by when I had been alone in that room for a long time, except for maybe seeing the nurses who didn't talk to me and took my vitals. But he was the only person that would actually ask me, "How are you today?" And just
Yeah.
take a moment and 30 seconds, of my 5-day hospital stay during that time, that 30 seconds is what I really remember. And that is something I think all of us is doing that for our youth and doing it for anyone who walks in through that door. Not just leaving it to the pastor to make sure that they get welcome to that church, but it
Yeah.
is up to the whole congregation to make sure that our churches are not turned into the clubhouses, that they are places for to share that love and compassion as Christ taught, and places of where we can use that house to really teach the word and really learn our Christian pilgrimage in our walk.
Oh, absolutely. I've said, I say it a lot. I would do whatever is necessary by any means necessary, right, to reach people, and it isn't always it almost never takes shape exactly how you thought it would. Like when we just were overwhelmed with a sense of direct calling from God to move to Haiti in 2015. um, you know, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's awesome. It must be so like a lot of the things people say, they just don't know what they're saying. It must be so awesome to just feel the movement of God and all. It's like, yeah, yeah, that's pretty awesome, but um, Haiti was the last place on this planet that I wanted to move. Okay. The very
Sure.
last. And I thought, surely, God, you misheard my prayers. I said Hawaii, I said Tahiti, like it wasn't Haiti. And God gave us exactly what we needed in a form of something I didn't want. And it wasn't like a warm and fuzzy. It was, oh, I'm going to end up in the belly of a whale if I don't do this. And so so when we ask of the Lord, how can I help my church? And then we ask of our pastor, how can I help you in the mission of this church? Your experience there is it may not be like, oh, hey, oh, you're when I was in the Marine Corps and my last enlistment in the Marines, I was a photographer and I did graphic arts a little bit, and I was involved that way. And so I went to my pastor then and offered to build them a website because that's something I was doing in those days. It was like early internet days, early 2000s.
Sure.
And he thought it was amazing. And in a meeting with me and him and my wife, he says, she's trying to tell him all this fancy stuff I could do that I barely knew how to do. And he's like, well, can we have it in color? I'm like, yes, you can definitely have it in color. And I kicked my wife under the table. Stop suggesting all this fancy flash and whatever. Yeah, I can do that, but if he just wants it in color, we'll just give it in color. And but in that case, it was like, here's what I'm willing to do. But then at that same time, God sent me a retired preacher who got me involved doing chapel services and rescue shelter mission, and really stretched me. And those early days of preaching are a lot of the experience I draw on for today. I'm going to share this with you real quick.
Yeah, please.
Among the congregational influences that hit me really hard in my early exploration of what the heck is a congregational church was Washington Gladden. I came across Washington Gladden, and I was just reading this earlier. I'll read it for you. This is from his book. I had this old edition of it rebound years ago, and I read this thing all the time. This is about 100 years ago, and he's talking about all the various aspects of how churches run and what the mission of the church is in real practical terms. And he says this. He says, if recreation is a normal need of human beings, and if the church finds thousands of its neighbors going down to ruin before its eyes because there is no recreation within their reach, that is not full of deadly poison. So not, at the bars and whatever. The instincts of Christian love would prompt the church to supply this normal need, to save a soul from death, even by means of a gymnasium or a bowling alley. is not a secular proceeding. The church that is too dainty fingered, which is my favorite thing Washington Gladden ever wrote, the church that is too dainty fingered. I love that phrase. The church that is too dainty fingered to use such means for the rescue of the youth from the ways of destruction has not learned how to be all things to all men, that it may by all means save some. I do and have done since about 2016 a Christian karate program, and I hear it's grown really really incredibly. And I'm even now doing a karate class at a senior center for retired adults, and which is fun, the funnest part of my week.
Nice.
And three kids classes on Tuesday nights, and over the coming years, it's just going to keep growing, I think. And you know, to be all things to all men requires a willingness to do things, to use our gifts, our talents, our interest, but also to do things that maybe are just meeting a need. One of the things that I miss from Mount Hope is that that gymnasium. I never
Yeah.
was able to tap into the full usage of how much that space could potentially reach that community. And but there it is. There's a church with a gymnasium that I don't know. It's been a few years, but that has
Mhm.
lots of people passing through it. And these are ways, things that we have to be creative. I think I wrote an article for that same
Absolutely.
Congregationalist a while back called "Creative Community Connections," and it was all about using karate as a means of outreach. But really, it was about using whatever you have as a means of outreach. I mean, if a church got a dozen new members, and they were all, they were all Christian motorcycle club people, I'd be like, hey, let's be the Christian motorcycle club, whatever, whatever it is. So there has to be, I think you really are, it's at least inherent in this particular article, if not overt, that there has to be a certain willingness, not only to ask, how can I help, but a willingness to hear it, like you just said.
Mhm.
Like and a little fear of children is healthy. You should be a little bit afraid of children. I have a lot of kids,
Sure.
and so
Sure.
but then it's like, oh, maybe I'll grow in the process of just meeting the need. So I'm glad you shared that.
Absolutely. And one thing, and I didn't really get a chance to really just talk about this in the article
Yeah,
of taking the burden off our pastors is that, churches, it's not so much what happens at church or in the walls of church, it's what
right,
happens outside of church.
right.
Are you calling your brothers and sisters, checking up on them, give them encouragement, asking them how they are?
Yeah,
Do you know their lives? Do you know the lives of their children, their schools, of of what they do in their day-to-day lives? Have you invited them over for dinner or lunch, gone out to coffee with them? And that
yeah,
is very, very important that any church that does not take care of its inner flock is a church that's doomed to fail.
yeah,
And and I heard an old Baptist saying too is for a church they ain't growing.
yeah.
Uh,
That's
you know,
right.
going on discipling. And
Yeah,
I know one you touched a very good point is that your connection to Haiti. Now Haiti being an island,
yeah,
and it has this isolative barriers of what is it like when you're in an isolated community and there is no one else to mission to or disciple
right.
to. I had a very similar experience like that in Alaska. Now I've been praying to God for me to have a home in Alaska one day in this brevity of life.
Yeah,
Now, I have to be very careful what I pray for because I've been in a few places in Alaska and I've been to the most northern city, which is Utqiagvik, or
mm,
formerly known as Barrow. Town of 5,000 people. It sits at 71 degrees, very well north of the Arctic Circle, about
wow.
1,200 miles away from the North Pole.
Yeah,
And I remember being there, and there's 9 churches in that community, and I went to
mm,
all 9 of them to kind of feel the pulse of the community. What is it like living in Barrow on May
huh,
1st when the sun's up for 24 hours
right.
and the Arctic Ocean's frozen and it's a warm front of 20 degrees out? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so,
Oh,
um, so what do you do? Because you're not going door to door trying to get people in your church. People are already going to church and they're
right,
very, very well entrenched in their churches. So what keeps
right.
people at church? What keeps their youth programs going? And that is, everyone just taking a hand, just maybe just a few minutes just to help out, and more hands create lighter work. And
Yeah.
it's to whatever your spiritual talent may be out there, ever who's watching, just it can most certainly be used. Because one of the biggest wastes, and I forget what author, I'm gonna have to look it up, but he said one of the biggest wastes in the world is a cemetery. And he's looking out at the cemetery, he goes, all those people that are in those graves never did the work that they wanted to do, never wrote the pages of a
Right.
book that they wanted to write. They never
Yeah.
performed the plays, or they never helped the child that they always said, or be the teacher that they said they were going to be. That's the biggest waste that
Yeah.
anyone can have. So anytime I look at a cemetery, I kind of think about my life. It's like, I only have a very short time to really make an impact in other
Yeah.
people's lives. So what can I do, like to be in Luke 9:24 of laying down my life for Christ and doing it for others as well, and never ever expecting anything in return.
Oh, absolutely. There was a book, I don't know if this is the one you're referencing, but it reminded me of it. There was a book written by Carrie and Chris Shook, probably close to 20 years ago. And I think the title was Living the Dash. I'm not positive of the title, but Carrie and Chris Shook is who wrote the book, married couple. And the idea was he had looked at a cemetery with through a similar lens, and he saw, whatever, the birth date, the end date, and he said, what life is that dash in between. What are you doing with the dash? And, man, I mean, in the midst of the meaning crisis I think that our culture is in, with the substructure of Western religious experience, at least as sociologically speaking. When that rug got pulled out from under the culture a bit, pretty substantially, you're left with you say, okay, there was problems with religion. Okay, fair enough. I'm there's problems in man's structures of religion. I'm on that bandwagon.
Sure.
However, pure religion is found or mentioned in the book of James, like you said, which is to the spirit of pure religion is caring for widows and orphans in their affliction. So what does that mean? That means the spirit of pure religion is sacrificial service. And we find ourselves, I think, most fully, we find our life hidden in God with Christ to the extent that we start giving our life away. And then counterintuitive to secular thinking, then we find the deepest levels of meaning and purpose when we go around giving ourselves away. Years and years ago, I was looking for a church to pastor when I first got out of the military, and stumbled accidentally, providentially into congregational churches. And there was this little old church. I don't remember the name of the city. Could have been that city. That was looking for a pastor in like the outer reaches of Alaska. And it just occurred to me when you're saying that, who knows what God might have in mind for you if you want a house in Alaska. The one that church that was looking for a pastor more than 20 years ago, they had a parsonage in Alaska. So who knows what God might have,
Oh yeah,
what God might have for
absolutely.
you in the future. And you mess around and you mess around and you say to God, I want to be used. I want you to use me. And then
Sure.
and then he crowds in on the boundaries that we put in place as to what that's supposed to look like. And
Oh, absolutely.
and you
It's so funny. Like I've asked God like to use me, and just like how like I'm like I have a vision of what that looks like in my head, and then God uses me, and it looks nothing like at all
yeah,
of how I thought that was going to play
no,
out.
for
So,
sure. I
but
mean,
it was
yeah.
an adventure for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I tell you what, man, I really appreciate what you're doing. It does my heart well on a personal level.
Mm,
To it really does. I love that congregation. My heart when I was in at Mount Hope was to be there a much longer than I was able to be there. It was a really important stop on my pilgrimage, as it were, on my journey personally. I grew a lot there, went through a couple of real very hard things, and celebrated a bunch of really beautiful things. And man, I'm glad you're there supporting that the pastor. I don't know him. I've always made it a habit to be uber respectful of the ministry of people in churches where I once served. I don't want to be
sure,
that guy that puts his nose into things. And
sure.
but I pray for the church. I pray for you. And man, I mean, you want to leave us with any thought? Hey, keep this up. I think these are great articles you're writing. And and it does my heart good too. It makes me proud. as I've had just a little bit of input on your journey. And so I love it. I love seeing people bearing fruit for the kingdom, where I even had a passing, glancing blow on the direction of their life in the Lord, you know.
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, in fact, I'll leave a couple of nuggets of of wise wisdom
Yeah,
to depart with, and that is, I know when we're out discipling or mission or on the mission field and we're trying to bring people to Christ, is that we'll get 1,000 or 1,000,000 no's or just people who just kind of shake us off, but you
yeah,
never know. You might be planting a seed that might just be watered 10 years down the road. So never give up trying. Always talk about the joys of just, what Christ has done for you. And the last one that is I'll leave is, I don't hide at all, whatsoever that, there was a time or period in my life that was very, very rough. And I even found, try to cure my problems through, in a bottle. And,
yeah,
that worked for maybe a short time, but,
right.
long term, it created more problems. Uh,
That's the trouble. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that really got me out of that trouble, and it's gotten me out of many troubles just besides alcoholism or any addiction or anything like that. It's really just the key to life is being selfless. When we're so wrapped up, especially say, I'll just use alcoholism for example, is, we're just in survival mode. But, when we
yeah,
start being selfless and helping that person that's next to us, we begin to feel that spiritual growth and be able to feel God kind of work within us. And so just always try to take a moment, just to try to help the other person and, just take a minute and whether it be giving someone a ride to the church or a ride from church, or just maybe even dropping something off if they have the coronavirus and they can't go out shopping. Just
right.
any little act and deed and service. Christ talked about love and compassion, and let's just all go out and do that and really show the world that, we are Christians and they will know that by our love.
Amen. That's a great way to end this conversation. Hey, God bless you, my brother. I am so glad to know you. And it's really amazing what God does, on the other side of me telling my wife, the three-piece suit guy, to reading your
Sure.
articles, to having been able to have you as a part of that lay ministry training program course, and then knowing you. So, hey, God bless you today, man. Take care.
God bless you. Take care. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.